So today's recipe is a twist on a treat that you probably grew up with at home. Something that was maybe made by your grandmother or something that came out of a package from a store. This recipe is called raspberry dumplings. Thanks for joining us today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century. So this recipe is called a raspberry dumpling in this recipe book, but I think we would recognize it by the name of a jelly roll. Now, jelly rolls, if we kind of dig around on the internet, we see that jelly rolls sort of have a history that goes back into the mid-19th century. And of course, as we know, jelly rolls, they are sort of a bread product that has, or maybe cake. And it's rolled up with jelly in the middle. It's a round little roll. We can see the swirl on the inside. They're fun, they look fun, they're very, very delicious. I've never seen one quite like it in the 18th century, but when I found this recipe, I said, aha, is this the sort of ancestor to the jelly roll? It's not the same in that it's not bready or cakey at all, that outer layer, but it's boiled pie crust. So I wanted to try this out to see if there was a real reason why they changed both sort of the technique and the kind of material they used in this wrapping. Maybe this one is actually better. The recipe comes from the experienced English housekeeper. This is Raffald's book. She started publishing this one in 1769, and it's called To Make Raspberry Dumplings. And it starts off with make a good cold paste. Roll it 1/4 inch thick, spread over it raspberry jam to your own liking. Roll it up and boil it in a cloth 1 hour at least. Take it up, cut it into 5 slices, lay one in the middle and the other 4 around it. Pour a little good melted butter in the dish. Grate fine sugar around the edge of the dish. It is proper for a corner or side for dinner. So she's going into a lot of explanation about even how it should be sort of presented, which is fun. A lot of recipes don't do that. That whole idea of where we want to have 5 slices and we want to put them, we want to arrange them nicely and pour butter in so it's in a little bath and put the sugar around. So it sounds like fun. I'm very, very concerned about the problem of the paste and boiling it. I'm worried that the water is going to get in there and wash all the jelly out. And I don't want to lose the jelly. So we got to be really careful about how we seal all that up. We'll see how that goes as we prepare. But first, we have to make a cold paste. So let's start off with our pie crust. And I'll say just right off the top, don't be scared of pie crust. Pie crust is fun to make. It might not be your first pie crust might not be perfect, but it is not hard and you will get better at it. And it is a wonderful thing to be able to make your own pie crust. It doesn't have to be perfect. And especially if you're going to experiment with any pie crusts, this recipe is probably the very best because it's going to get boiled. It's not going to get baked, so it doesn't have to be light and fluffy. She does in the cookbook say something like make a good cold paste. This isn't the hot paste, which we aren't used to that much in modern cookery because we don't use a boiled butter or a boiled oil. This is a cold paste, so we use cold butter here. So we have a ratio right now of 3:1 in volume. 3 times as much volume of flour as we have butter. So I have approximately 2 cups of flour here and about 1/2 cup of butter. And I've spread it out into, kind of chunked it up. It's cold and it's in little bits. If we could make it even smaller bits, it would be better. I did add a little bit of salt here, mix it in ahead of time. We want a little bit of salt in that. So let's put that butter in here. We're just gonna spread our flour over the top of that butter. We don't want to heat it up. We want it to stay cold. So I'm gonna come in here with my fingers and just grab it a little bit and spread it out. What we wanna do is get that butter, that cold butter, all the way into our flour without heating it up. So our idea is to keep it as cold as possible. So I just grab it a little bit and swoosh it and then keep going until it's all spread throughout the flour without getting it all hot. I've got the butter, the cold butter, fully distributed in our flour, and it's looking really good. Now it's time for the water, and we need to add just enough water to bring it to the proper consistency, what you would expect from pie dough. We might do a little bit more than we normally would because, again, this pie dough has to seal, it has to be watertight. If water gets into that, it's just plain gonna mess it up. So let's make a little hole, and we're gonna add a little bit of cold water and then see where it goes. If it really starts to make up to the right consistency right away, then we're good. Maybe we need to add a little bit more water, maybe not. I think this is actually gonna work out. It's feeling pretty good. So we're going to sprinkle our surface with a little bit of flour. Obviously, if I don't do this, this pie crust is just going to stick right down to the surface. So make sure to flour it appropriately. Not too thick, but not too thin. We don't want it to stick. Once we've done that, we can just put our ball of our pie crust here. Again, don't handle it too much. You want it to stay cool. So we've got it rolled out. I kind of rolled it out into an oblong because we want to be able to roll it up. And I guess at this point, again, I'm not sure exactly where to go. I haven't done this one before. I think we're going to go ahead and cut this into a nice, very long rectangle, but I think I want pretty regular edges. Since we have to get them to seal, we don't want it to be ragged. Maybe that would leave an opening for the water to get in. We don't want that to happen. So there are the sides. I'm gonna get this end. There we are. We'll leave this, we'll definitely keep this extra so that if we need to sort of patch up anything, we can. Okay, there's our rectangle. I guess it's time to spoon on the raspberry jelly. So we've got our dough all cut and ready to go, rolled out the right distance. I've got the jam or jelly here put in place. And now I have to be careful about how I roll it up. Probably this is the hardest part. First I want to go ahead and I've put the jelly all out to one side. So it goes clear to the edge here, but it's well inside of an inch every place else. This is the very start we're gonna roll, so we don't need to have a blank spot here. And I'm just gonna wet the edge with just plain water so that we can start to get a really good seal every place where we want it to be waterproof here. The cloth that we're gonna be boiling in will help us some, but we wanna make sure that it doesn't get inside of our dumpling. So why water? Why am I using water? Well, turns out that flour and water is exactly what old-fashioned wallpaper paste is. This water is going to react with that and turn it into a glue. You could use something like egg whites or egg yolks also, but we don't want to add a kind of an eggy flavor here. The water is going to work, hopefully, perfectly. Now we need to work on rolling this up. So we need to make sure these ends are all sealed up properly. So I'm just gonna pinch them up so all those edges get sealed properly. And I see we got a little bit of problem here on this sort of last flap as it comes over. The jelly was kind of squishing out ahead of it. So I have our extra stuff and I can create a patch. We can patch over the top of that. It might not stick perfectly, but we'll have enough water here that we can patch over that whole thing. Let me get a little water. We have to prepare our cloth for this. And normally on a boiled pudding, especially one like this one where we need to protect the contents, we put our cloth into boiling water and then we flour it. And that will help make it waterproof so that it won't let the water come in. This is our natural linen pudding cloth here, and the natural linen, when it heats up, when it gets wet, it naturally expands and gets tighter, so it'll help make it waterproof, and then that flour will sort of finish the idea. Now it's time to put this roll in the middle and figure out how to tie it up properly. I put the jelly roll at the very edge of this cloth because unlike a normal pudding where we would put it in the dead center and it was a ball and we wrap all the way around it, this one, because it's an oblong like a giant Tootsie Roll, we've got to put it at the edge of the cloth and then we can start to roll the whole thing up. So there it is, look at that. And we just roll it up, roll it up. Boy, it's going to be waterproof. Wow. Wow, that should work really well. So now we're just going to tie off the ends and then maybe one in the middle. Maybe we'll kind of do a spiral around the outside. I think we've got this tied up so that it'll work. It's tied up very tightly at the end so that no water can get in. And then I went ahead and went around that center section to keep it from sort of opening up and causing problems. Now it's time for it to go into boiling water. It should go in directly to boiling water, cover the entire part that needs to be boiled. If this end sticks out, it's no problem. And that water needs to stay in a rolling boil for a whole hour. It boiled for an hour. I took it out and I let it cool down. Not all the way cooled down, but most of the way cooled down. Removed that cloth. You have to remove that cloth before it gets stone cold or you can get it apart. And if you try to move it too quickly, this will be too soft and it'll break apart. So you do have to pick just the right time. I got it out without damaging it. It was so wonderful. Didn't have hardly any leaking going on. So most of the jelly was it was all intact. Water did not infiltrate and cause damage. The great thing is what we're doing here is cooking it at 220 degrees, 212 degrees, right? So it doesn't overcook it. It tends to, leave it in this very interesting cooked texture, which we here in North America aren't probably quite as used to. So boiled puddings aren't something we normally do. But turned out perfect. I let it cool off so that all the way down to a cool room temperature so that we could cut this properly so that we could display it on the plate exactly like the recipe desired. And it's very beautiful and it did cut out very well. I was very concerned. Do I need to use a thread? Do I need to, what do I need to do? The pie crust set up firm enough so that I was able to cut it without all of the jelly squishing out, which was what I was worried about. So the real question is, how did it turn out? What is it going to taste like? So here's our chance to try it out. It's very, very good, like you would expect pie crust and raspberry jam to be. How can you mess it up, right? Which is a good thing about a recipe like this. So simple. Almost anyone can do it. And it looks really fun, very beautiful. You can see why you would use it on the table just for its beauty alone, much less this wonderful treat. I went ahead and did the directions like they showed. Let's put some butter in there, let's put some sugar in there. So if you need just a little more sweetness, if the jam just isn't enough for you, there's a little more. And boy, I really enjoy this one. It's too bad that, I just couldn't eat the whole thing because I want to eat the whole thing. So what I was very, very concerned about was texture. What's going to happen when we boil this pie crust dough, which is not something we normally do, and the texture actually turns out very, very fun. It's like the bottom crust of a pie. Because when we do the bottom crust of the pie, it has moisture on it all the time. If it's cooked properly, it's not gummy. It has this kind of very firm texture, but not flaky like the top of the pie. Personally, some of the best part of the pie crust for me. I really like that part. And that's what we get all through this on this one. So it's got this great consistent texture, and it's a totally different way. We just don't do anything like this. If you're interested in other boiled puddings, and we've done quite a few on the channel here, and they turn out just so different than we're used to, check out this episode.